I have worked the night shift at Dunmore Veterans Medical Pavilion for going on 3 years, and I have seen patients come through that ward who did not want to be reached. Soldiers who had learned to make themselves small inside, to go quiet in a way that had nothing to do with silence, and everything to do with a wall. They had built so many layers thick that the wall had become the man. I understood it, in the way a 24-year-old orderly can understand something he has never lived. I respected it, tried to give those men room. But I had never seen a ward give up on a patient the way that ward gave up on Sergeant Damon Veracruz by the third night of his admission. Not cruelly, not with malice, just quietly the way water goes around a stone. He had come in on a Sunday, transferred from a surgical unit downstate, 3 deployments behind him, and a leg wound that had healed wrong and needed to heal again the right way. 31 years old. The intake notes said he had been uncooperative at the previous facility. That was the word they used. The nurses at Dunmore learned quickly that uncooperative meant something specific in his case. It meant he would not let anyone touch him. Not the attending, not the physical therapist, not the nurse who tried to check his dressing at 6 in the morning. He would look at them from the far side of the bed with eyes that were not angry, exactly, just very far away, and he would say quietly that he was fine. He did not need anything, they could go. By the second day, Dr. Harlan Pruitt had written in the chart that the patient was resistant to therapeutic engagement, and that the case was being escalated to the psychiatric liaison. He said it in rounds with the flat efficiency of a man who had moved on before the sentence was finished. I was in the hallway when he said it, rolling a linen cart past the door, and I watched the nurses around him nod and write things down. That was the same morning I first noticed Claire Warwick. She was the new night shift nurse. 2 weeks into her rotation at Dunmore, she was standing just outside Veracruz's door with a cup of water and a small paper cup of crackers, not trying to go in, not knocking, just standing there with her back to the wall, as though she had all the time in the world. She was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with her dark hair pulled back and a lanyard with her badge and nothing else. She looked like she was thinking. I slowed the cart and asked her if she needed anything. She looked at me and smiled, small and without performance. "No," she said. "Thank you, Caleb." She had read my name tag. She went back to thinking. I went on with the cart, but I watched her. For the next hour she stood at that door, sat in the chair in the hallway outside it, or walked away and came back. She never pushed the door open. She never knocked a second time. When Veracruz finally said, through the door, that he didn't need anything, she said clearly that she wasn't there to do anything to him. She was just there in case he wanted company. He didn't respond. She sat back down. When Dr. Pruitt came through on his afternoon check, he found her in the chair and stopped. He was not a cruel man, but he had the manner of someone who had learned that efficiency was a form of kindness, and who had stopped checking whether that was still true. He told her the case had been escalated, and that she should redirect her attention to patients who could benefit from it. He used those words. Patients who could benefit. She looked up at him without flinching, and said she understood, and he went down the hall, and she sat back down in the chair. I watched her that night. She was the quietest person I had ever seen work. She did her rounds, she did her charting, she answered call lights, and in between she came back to that hallway and sat outside that door. Not talking mostly. Sometimes she talked. Not to the door exactly. Near it. The way you might talk out loud to yourself when you are trying to work something through. I came past her at 11 and caught a few words, and what I heard stopped me. She was describing a landscape. Not poetically, practically. The way the ground sat at a certain elevation, the way the temperature dropped in the last hour before dawn, the weight of a ruck across your shoulders, when you had been still for too long. She knew the weight down to the number. She knew what the cold felt like in your hands. She was not describing something she had read. I stood in the hallway and listened and understood that I did not know who she was. At midnight, the door opened. Veracruz stood in the doorway in his hospital gown and looked at her. He was a broad-shouldered man, not tall, with a face that had been through weather. He looked at her the way a man looks at something that hasn't done what he expected. She looked back at him and did not move. She said, steady and quiet, "I know it's cold in there. The vent runs all night. You want the chair?" He didn't answer that. He said, "Where'd you serve?" She said, "Logar, second tour, Baraki Barak district." Attached to a ranger element, something shifted in the hallway. I felt it before I understood it. He said a word. It wasn't a word I recognized. It was a short phrase. Actually, 2 words. Clipped said the way a man says something he expects the other person either to know or not know, with no room in the middle. Test, and not a gentle one. She answered without a pause, not with the same phrase, but with the answer to it. The second half of something. The call to a response. The kind of thing that only makes sense if you learned it in a specific place, at a specific time, with specific people around. He stood in the doorway for a moment and I watched his shoulders change. Not drop, exactly. More like something that had been held at cost was briefly put down. He said, "You were on the 19-hour hold," she said. I was. He stepped back from the door. She stood up and walked inside. I did not go near that room for the rest of the night. I did my work and I let them alone. At 3 in the morning I came past and the light under the door was on, and I could hear, faintly, 2 voices, not words, just the low sound of a real conversation. I kept walking. By morning, he had eaten. He had let her check his dressing, change it, document it. He had let the overnight vitals get taken. He had asked, according to the chart, when the physical therapist came in. I was finishing my shift at 7, when I saw him sitting up in the bed with the television on and a tray in front of him. 3 days before, that tray would have sat untouched in the hallway. Claire was at the nurse's station, finishing her charting when the man came through the main ward. Doors. He was in civilian clothes, jeans, a wool jacket, but he moved the way men move when the military is in the bone and not just the biography. He was carrying a paper coffee cup in each hand. He stopped at the desk and asked, quietly, for Nurse Warwick. She looked up. She did not know him by face, I could see that. He set both cups down on the desk. He said his name was Len Okafor. He said he was Vera Cruz's former squad leader, and he had been in the parking garage for 2 days, because Damon wouldn't see anyone. And no one could tell him anything useful, and he hadn't been able to make himself drive home. He said someone on the overnight had texted him at 4 in the morning to tell him Damon had eaten and asked about PT. He looked at her. He brought his right hand up to his forehead, clean and deliberate, and he held it. She was in scrubs. She had no cover, no uniform. She returned it exactly the way a soldier does when a soldier salutes. Not tentatively, not as a courtesy, but as a statement between equals who both know what it means. I had been moving past the station with my cart. I stopped. I don't know how long it lasted. Long enough. Okafor lowered his hand and said something to her I couldn't hear, and she said something back. And he picked up one of the coffee cups and walked down the hall toward Vera Cruz's room. Dr. Pruitt came through the ward doors, 30 seconds later, chart under his arm, ready for rounds. He came past the nurse's station and saw her at the desk, and I watched him slow down. He had seen it. Maybe not all of it, but enough. He looked at her for a moment with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not embarrassed, exactly. Recalibrated. Like a man who has just measured something and gotten a number he didn't expect. He didn't say anything. He went on to his first patient. Claire drank her coffee and finished her charting. She did not mention it to anyone on the floor, as far as I know. She clocked out at 7:15, and I watched her walk through the main doors into the cold morning, and that was that. But I'm a different orderly than I was before that week. I think about it when I stand outside a patient's door and feel the urge to rush, check the box, to move on to someone who can benefit. I think about what it costs a man to hold himself at that kind of distance, and what it takes, not force, not efficiency, just patience and the right words spoken by the right person to bring him back. She knew the weight. She knew the cold. She knew the word. And she stayed in that hallway until it mattered.